The LSAT essay is not only optional, but also unscored. It's called in part a writing sample because copies of it are sent to the universities to which you apply. I don't work in university admissions, so I don't know how seriously law schools take the essay, but I always recommend you do optional essays on standardized exams, and if you're watching this video, you probably are. I make that recommendation for several reasons. Number one, it gives you a competitive advantage. Let's say you and another test taker get the same score on the multiple choice part, but your essay is better, you look better. Number two, it's a controlled variable. You don't always know what's coming on the multiple choice part, but you do know what's coming on the essay, and it's easier to give a controlled response in writing. Number three, the foundations of all Western education are reading and writing. No matter how STEM your chosen field of study or career is, if you study it, you're going to have to read and write a lot. And that is especially true for law, which is so intensely verbally focused. If you're interested in studying or practicing law, I assume you not only enjoy writing, but also are good at it. So why not demonstrate that by attempting the essay? And finally, anytime you choose to do something you're not required to do, you show you are unafraid to take risk and willing to go above and beyond. Let's talk about the prompt for this essay. At the top of the prompt in a box, you see the directions, which you never need to read because they're always the same. They tell you are presented with alternatives. An alternative is always one of two and asked to pick one and defend your choice. It's not a traditional argumentative essay, but it's still argumentative in that you have to take a position and defend it. Your only takeaway from the directions is that there is no right or wrong answer. Your objective on this essay is not to be creative, but to demonstrate that you can argue your side, which is what lawyers do. After the directions, you are introduced to Mr. Moneybags. Somebody has money and he wants to spend it on a product or service. Maybe he wants to hire someone, which would be paying someone for a service. But the buyer is picky and he has criteria. Those criteria are bulleted, and there are always two bullets. But if you read the information carefully, you may be able to detect that the buyer actually has three criteria because two have been sandwiched into one. After the buyer's criteria, you're given a summary of the two choices. What you want to do is take careful notes on the criteria and choices in table format. I like to put the criteria in the left column and the two choices along the top row, and that way you can clearly see which of the two choices meets the buyer's criteria better. I know the directions state that there is no right or wrong answer, but it is pretty obvious which is the better choice. That choice will meet the buyer's criteria 100% up until a certain point, at which point it gets kind of iffy, but you should still be able to argue why that is the preferable alternative. Again, this is not a traditional argumentative essay, but you still need to be familiar with basic argumentative essay writing concepts like indirect and direct thesis statements, supporting points, specific examples, transitions, in order to be able to write it. If you need to review those, I include a link to that information in the description. The outline for this essay is the classic traditional structure of introduction and conclusion with body paragraphs sandwiched in between. But because I want you to organize the essay around the criteria, the number of body paragraphs depends on the number of criteria. If the buyer has two criteria, you have two body paragraphs. If he has three, you have three, etc. In the introduction, I want you to do several things. I want you to assume that the reader of your essay does not have access to the prompt. I think it's rude to write about stuff and assume that the reader has all the information that you have. Be kind to your reader and assume that he doesn't. So in the first sentence, summarize the buyer's criteria, what he wants. In the second sentence, summarize the two choices. The third and final sentence of the introduction is always the thesis statement, and a thesis statement is always two things. It's main idea plus supporting points. The main idea is your choice, and the supporting points are how that choice meets the criteria. If you want to write a direct thesis statement, and I prefer that you do, you summarize in the thesis statement the supporting points that you will elaborate later in the body paragraphs. If you want to write an indirect thesis statement, you don't summarize the supporting points in it, but suggest that you have supporting points by writing something like for several reasons. In the body paragraphs, you can write a topic sentence if you want to. A topic sentence like a thesis statement is always two things. Its main idea plus the supporting point for that body paragraph. The main idea, again, is your choice, and the supporting point is how that choice meets the criterion for that body paragraph. After the topic sentence, I want you to write about both choices, how your choice is good and the other one isn't. And then you kind of just want to argue it out. You have primarily two ways that you can do that. You can ask questions. Asking questions is a way to weaken your opponent's argument. In fact, in psychotherapy, there is one modality in which the therapist never asks the client any questions because questioning can make a person feel in a subordinate position. So ask questions, ask hypothetical questions. And as always in essay writing, give specific examples. Specific examples are narratives, little stories that illustrate the point you're trying to make. Examples can be real, hypothetical, or parallel. A parallel example applies the topic to another topic. For example, if you're writing about business, you can give an example from sports. In each body paragraph, I'd like you to ask at least one question and give at least one specific example. If you're not satisfied with two body paragraphs, in the third body paragraph, you can give what's called an alternative, another way to meet the buyer's criteria. In the conclusion, the first thing that you do is always restate the thesis statement. A lot of people do that in 2 sentences, so you can do it in 2 sentences if you want to. And if you didn't give the alternative in the third body paragraph, here in the conclusion is where you can give an alternative. So that's an introduction to the LSAT essay. To read more in detail, including an example prompt along with example essay, please visit my website. I include that information in the description. The essay that I wrote is longer than anything you'll have time for on the exam, but I just wanted to give you an example of everything that you can do. And for a private lesson with me, please also visit my website. That information too is in the description. I've worked online with people from all over the world, and I'd love to work with you. Take care.